Okay. So,
Okay, so let me ask you first, how is your pelvic floor and incontinence?
so it has basically in the last, basically since I've been here, for the past month and a half, there have been no accidents. Even, I'll tell you what, even know what else has changed? The initiation to sneeze used to bring up this like anxiety, like cross my legs, and now I don't even need to do that. Now that doesn't come. And
That's awesome.
so it's and what I really think again, this idea of the xiphoid was locked down into this locked position. So if it's already locked down and I sneeze, I'm only going to press down. But when I'm able to release and I sneeze, now I can go back to that position I was locked in. So I've gained more space. Similarly, if I, again, balloon, pee hole, if my ribs are clamped down, there is nowhere for that to go but down. If my ribs, however, unclamp and I create space, now the direction of air can wrap around and go widthwise. And there's also room in this upper half.
You know, this is so interesting because I had one client and I couldn't figure it out. I give the breathing and like I give the other exercise, all the other song. She just leaks after she pees, and then we cannot figure it out in my mind. And then like I talked to a friend, and she told me that, did you check her thoracal mobilization? And I'm like, no, but yeah, I remember it seemed like it was like, like not mobile. I remember. And then I give her thoracal mobilization exercises, and then it worked out.
Mm-hmm. And I would agree. It's certainly those mobilizations would be helpful, but beyond that layer, the ability for your normal to be open. So not an exercise. Your rest is open because
Yeah.
yes, we need to know where to go, but if I do all these exercises and then my finish is still here, those exercises have not changed my rest general position. So so instead of necessarily a thing, if it was using a thing to kind of prop me open, I need to know how to exist without the thing. And so generally speaking, people mobilize the thoracic back with something behind you and you lay on top. But the bigger piece for me was using the frontal space to open. So instead of my rest position being relaxed abs where my ribs fall over the top, now my resting position is open abs. It's and it isn't just it isn't a reverse crunch where like, huh, but my rest has opened and lengthened that position. This is on but not tense. It's on but not working.
Yeah. So you used to, like contract your abs the whole time.
I think
You realize,
right, and I wouldn't say contract, but my rest default looked like contraction. So all this is here, this
okay.
rounding is my rib cage falling and my abs being dead. Now I could crunch in this position and contract them, but what I needed was the rest to be open. And part of that is the sit
Open, yeah.
bones. So if you consider that if I'm sitting on the ground or standing, I push down on my sit bones and my ribs can release if this is relaxed. Because this tends to, safety wise, this tends to latch on and stay latched on. And again, you don't know what you don't know. But as soon as I was like, oh, like as soon as I was able to let go of this point where the ribs split, now there was space created, just like the balloon. Now there was options and opportunity. whereas staying locked down, it only had one place to go.
That's awesome. It's
Yeah.
also how you know, like it's nice to have like someone who has this much of body awareness, because usually I would have to realize these things,
Mhm.
on my patients, so that I can, like give feedback. And do you realize that you are holding this part down and like this and that? And it really, every time it's different.
Mhm.
So like if you would be my client and you didn't have this body awareness, it would probably take us many more sessions to fix this thing,
Yeah.
like, but it was just one, like one thing, and then you did the rest by
Yeah.
yourself. That's the favorite, like
Take it.
people to work with ever.
Agreed. Like again, give them one thing and let them get into it. Ideally, a lot of times people they're not into that kind of problem solving. They're not into they're like, nope, tell me what to do, which leads me kind of back real quickly to our original session where you were like, when I was doing the rolling and you're like, you're actually moving really well, but I
Yeah.
still had the issue. So that tells me again this idea of exercise versus rest, where in the exercise I knew how to open, but I didn't know how to adjust my resting position. So I could do the exercises because I could pay attention. I paid attention to motion. What I started doing maybe the last 2-3 months is paying attention to rest. And that's simple. And again, even just sitting here, the pressing down on this driving, everything, pressing down on the sit bones to allow that xiphoid to relax up changed everything. And it was this gradual process, but now anything upper body, moving wise, I now, instead of just my pelvis is my steering wheel, which it was, like now I have 2 steering wheels. And if you imagine a car having 2 steering wheels, right? The ability, everything is new. Everything you thought you knew was different. And so to go into that and be like, oh my gosh, this is uh instead of neglecting all the old, revisit with this new body and this new awareness, all those things that were difficult, and see how it's changed. And this is that bigger idea you were talking about of test retest, right? Sometimes
Yeah.
it's in session, but I like it to be weeks and months apart. So I'm not paying attention at the test. I'm doing all this other stuff. And then I randomly come back to the test and I'm like, oh, so
Exactly.
is it the learning or is it the test that we're catering to? And that's, most students are like, I just need to know what's on the test. I was like, oh, there's all this stuff to learn and think about. And
Exactly. And you, like teach me too, because when I was working with that client, I was only thinking about the spine, the thoracic. Okay, the thoracic wasn't moving well, so that was the issue. But then now you bring in the xiphoid. Now I'm thinking differently, like, because there is an EMG study actually shows that the people who had incontinence, they have overactive abdominal muscles, especially the oblique externus, which is the muscle that is brings in the xiphoid. Like that's
yep, yep. Who knew? Who knew there was science behind
yeah,
it?
exactly.
And that's the beauty.
That's like unbelievable.
It's the beauty of the anecdote and the understanding to match the science versus people just looking at the science, because again, the science came from a question, right? So are you going to be behind the science following it, or could you perhaps take an idea and leapfrog it and do your own experiments? And so I hope this is helpful and effective to everyone. Again, their how is going to be different, but
Hopefully.
it's certainly a piece, at least again, to point attention to and be like, what about there?
Yeah, because the other issue with the woman health physio or pelvic health physio, if you talk about in terms of the incontinence, everything is about the pelvic floor. Like it's like the pelvic. We need to strengthen it. We need to relax it, or we need to do whatever. But it's all about the pelvic floor, and that like narrow point of view kind of like stuck people into a position that we cannot help people. It doesn't work. Like stop looking at the pelvic floor.
Exactly.
Just look at the whole thing. Like, and there's the experience out there, there's the science out there to tell you to look at the other places, but we're still stuck in the pelvic floor. And I'm like, that's the thing that I'm trying to tell people, like look other places. Like it can be anything.
Yeah, especially this idea where they are examining, you have an issue, pelvic floor issue. You've been examined and tested, and everything in the pelvic floor is fine. So they come back and they say you're fine, and you're like, but I'm not fine, right? So I'm this crazy person with this weird body, or again, did the science and did the professionals fail to look elsewhere? What is the rib cage but an inverted pelvis, right? The same exact thing. You've got the diet, etc. So if we have to consider again that the entire container,
Yeah,
and
it's actually a container, a whole. It's like it's the whole thing, like the abdomen, the low back, the diaphragm, and the pelvic floor. It's a complete structure on its own. So it's like it would be like fool to believe that only the pelvic floor is affected and not the others.
Right. And even if you think about, yes, there's gravity, etc. But just again, like if I had a balloon and it was leaking out the bottom of the balloon, instead of looking what's going on here, it's logical to be like, what's happening at the top that is making this thing go in that direction? So balloon analogy. But yeah, so look elsewhere, guys. Look up. Look at that xiphoid.
Yes.
I'll stop recording right now.